Hello, hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to another video. We are going to be reading chapter 10 in A Guide for Lightworkers by Archangel Michael. Also the author and writer here, Saratoga Ocean. I believe she does write the first portion of this book. And then the second portion of the book is completely channeled by Archangel Michael. And that is where we are at today, reading chapter 10. And it does say here that from part 2 is completely channeled, and Archangel Michael is the angel that she connected with. So as usual, before I start reading, I want to remind you that this book was written in a way that was meant to be absorbed with your heart and not your mind. So if you take a moment just to set your intention, kind of picture all of your energy around your heart. Picture yourself taking this this communication in with your heart. I will make sure I do my best to do that as well. So let's go ahead and get started on chapter 10, The Nature of the Universe. Greetings. I am that which is known as Michael, and to many as Archangel Michael. To some, I am simply known as Michael. Let us begin at the very beginning, which ironically has nothing whatsoever to do with time. So what is the beginning, you might ask? The beginning in reality exists as the ever-present and illustrious moment called now. It is interesting, is it not, that you reside permanently in this moment, yet it appears to be that which is the most unfamiliar to you and the most elusive. And it is primarily because of this mystery that you do not fully understand the universe in which you live. All of your sciences begin in the so-called arena of time and space, and it is from there that your human species attempts to understand all that is. The problem with this approach is that it includes many, many false assumptions. For example, it presumes that God creates within the space-time spectrum. It doesn't. But wait, you might say, how does that explain the very existence of life as we know it? Take note, dearest friends, of the fact that nearly all of your scriptures, in ancient as well as current writings, are fully aware that something exists here in a way that God did not intend. Now, why is that important? It is important because how you hold that fact in your consciousness and the way in which it influences your perspective completely determine the outcome of your existence and universal life. Notice that I did not say planetary life. Planetary life is all too short in its current form to accommodate the width and breadth of all that you must consider. There is much debate, for example, about what must happen after one dies. This perspective alone is erroneous and can easily be proven to be so. What will happen to me after I die? If you can contemplate that question, it is clear that you are aware of the fact that you don't. Otherwise, how do you explain the you in that sentence? Now, this can be intimidating to some due to the fact that they are completely unaware of who that you will be after this thing called death occurs. And if such a profound lack of awareness exists, then does that not call into question the you that you think you are right now? Does it not seem natural that your sense of who you are should expand throughout the universe at a conscious level right now? And if it doesn't, then why not? So this, dearest friends, is where we must begin if we are to embark upon any understanding whatsoever about the nature of the universe in which you live. It begins first and foremost with waking up into an acknowledgement that you yourself must certainly be larger than the earth-based circumstances in which you live. This understanding is vital because it is the only way that you can find any power in dealing with those earth-based circumstances as they exist right now. And you are soon to find out, due to your rapidly advancing technology, that these earth-based circumstances will not remain merely earth-based a whole lot longer. Let us take a moment to examine the current most popular perspective of life on Earth. Mostly, it is a mystery that is fraught with many questions. Why am I here? Where did I come from? And what am I supposed to be doing? And in relation to the surrounding physical space of the universe, the largest questions persist. Is there life out there, and who made all this stuff anyway? Do you not find it strange that so many questions exist about things that should be so obvious? People are literally tormented by these questions for their entire lives. It is very unsettling to know so little about such utterly fundamental issues, such as who you are, where you are, and why. It is rather like being completely blind. This lack of knowing produces fear. The fear then gives rise to any and all manner of answers. This is how the word God was created. The literal definition of the word God is the one who created all that is. This sounds wonderful except for one thing. You don't experience it. And that is indeed the problem, is it not? It is a conceptual knowing, and therefore you tend to pray in the dark. It often feels like that, doesn't it? It can feel as though you doubt whether or not anyone hears you. What is the primary thing that produces this doubt? Lack of results, of course. So in this tremendous void of experience, many temporary answers are generated. Why do I say temporary? Because they're not working, that's why. Rather than take that statement at face value, let us take a moment to examine that fact in the proverbial light of day. Planet Earth is a violent planet. That is an indisputable fact. There is violence everywhere, and not just in the human realm of existence. There is a great deal of violence in what you refer to as the natural world. Did you not notice that in order for anything here to live, something else must die? It's called the food chain. How peculiar that the death of one thing actually contributes to the so-called life of another. That is, of course, until that thing must eventually die as well. So in this peculiar chain of events, it is ultimately death that makes life possible. And herein lies your first clue. A clue to what, you might ask? A clue to the fact that something could be very, very wrong with this picture. Yet there are those who already know this, aren't there? They are called radical vegetarians. Don't eat anything with eyes, they will tell you. It's better to eat only plants. At least they can't see what you're doing. Now, that is a noble gesture indeed, and it is certainly born of a sincere desire to rectify the situation. But those who feel this way certainly know that it is not enough in terms of correcting the larger violence all around you. How many animals in the wild are not able to become vegetarian? But then this gets rationalized as natural, and thus the confusion begins. And what about all of the spiritual violence? Let us examine that for a moment, shall we? Religions are famous for their very creative solutions of slaughtering everyone who does not believe as they do. Naturally, this seems appropriate since Earth is clearly a violent place already. So why wouldn't this solution fit right in with God's plan? After all, according to many religions, God is very happy to punish you after death anyway. So why not speed up the process and do away with all those non-believers? We're just helping God out, aren't we? And this, of course, leads to the ancient subject of man's injustice to man. Why are human beings so cruel to one another? Philosophers have pondered this question for eons and have basically come up with only one answer. Because people feel like it, that's why. Naturally, the philosophers don't put it in such simple terms. They would be out of a job if they did. Instead, they ponder all the reasons why people may feel this way. In other words, they attempt to justify it. They do so by examining the circumstances in which these feelings to do harm to another may arise, and they attempt to explain how human beings react to those circumstances accordingly. This is all well and good, but it does nothing to solve the problem. And herein lies yet another clue. The fact that all of this violence is clearly perceived as a problem indicates that human beings are fully aware of the fact that something is indeed wrong with this picture. Now we must examine what human beings have tried to do to correct this violent state of affairs. It starts with perspective. In order to act upon any set of circumstances, the mind will always produce a perspective or mental guideline about what is going on. From there, it will attempt to take action according to those guidelines. For the purpose of this dialogue, we will examine the spiritual perspective that is most common to humankind on this planetary Earth. It starts with a belief that all of this violence is somehow God's will. And for those who no longer subscribe to the belief in God as a separate entity, this belief takes on a new form. I, as a soul, wanted to have this experience for myself. Now, that belief works out really well until such people find themselves in the throes of some horrific type of pain and suffering, in which case they will likely find themselves changing their minds rather quickly. I will say as an aside that that's sort of what I've believed, is that I've chosen my experiences, bad or good. So this kind of is definitely sort of touching a belief system for me that many people believe. And I've often wondered to myself, would I still feel that way if I were to experience something horrific or tragic? So it's just funny, because I don't know how many other people out there feel that way about making these experiences for yourself because of, the need for soul growth. So I'm wondering about that right there. I am. Okay. Sit back for a moment, if you will, and try to picture this situation in an entirely neutral way. Imagine yourself standing back away from the planet, much like an extraterrestrial might do, and allow yourself to get a real sense of the profound amount of violence, pain, and suffering going on. Now, switch for a moment to what you know to be true in your heart, that God is love, pure and simple. Oh, now I lost my place here. Okay. Except for one thing. It doesn't explain all the suffering. You see, you can't have it both ways. Either God is pure love or it's not. If God has the capacity to sanction and create violence, pain, and suffering, then how do you explain your clear, unadulterated knowingness that God is love? And here is where the problem arises. The fear of not knowing the truth about God, not knowing the truth about oneself, and not knowing the truth about the universe at large produces a desperation to produce an answer, regardless whether or not that answer makes any sense. The mind says all of this must be God's will, since we know, of course, that God is omnipresent. This answer should immediately be recognized as flawed, simply because it goes without saying that God/love cannot beget pain and suffering. But because the mind is desperate for an answer, any answer, it simply chooses to overlook this glaringly obvious fact. Instead, it looks for new and better ways to justify this answer. Well, since God can't be bad, it must be humans that are bad. The only problem with this line of reasoning is that God is omnipresent, remember? That means 100% present in humans too. 100% present in humans too. So you are back to the same dilemma again. A simpler way to look at it is as follows. God is infinite love. The key word here is infinite, in which case there can be no such thing as finite, correct? That is, if infinite really means infinite, which of course it does. So, how then do you explain the existence of this experience called finite? Have you ever contemplated something known as the first original lie? And what is the nature of a lie after all? It is that which attempts to eclipse or to go against the truth. So the only possible lie that could be told about the infinite is to declare itself not infinite. And thus is produced the illusion of the finite. For all lies are illusions, are they not? Now, I am fully aware of the difficulty that most finite beings have in declaring their very existence to be an illusion. So let us examine for a moment why that is. It is because you deem violence to be real. By what means do you do this? By declaring that which can destroy something else bears the most evidence of its reality. By declaring that which can destroy presents the greatest, most concrete evidence of existence in your world. The nature of the finite is to clash with itself. It is based solely on division. Ultimately, it is based on the original lie. I am not infinite. This translates into I am not love. This ultimately translates into another statement, I am not God. And thus is born the illusion of the Antichrist, meaning that which goes against God. Some refer to it as the fallen angel. But I must inform you that there is no such thing as a so-called fallen angel, simply because there is no such thing as something that can exist by virtue of what it is not. Make sense? Surely by now someone is saying, but Archangel Michael, we do exist in a finite dimension, don't we? Well, in truth, you actually don't exist there. You don't exist there. That is why you have so many questions. It is why you can't actually see anything and why you make up answers that don't make any sense. It is why you don't experience God and you feel forced to settle for religion and philosophy instead. It is why you refer to your higher self and desperately try to bring it here so that it will have some influence over your life. It is why you have compartmentalized the entire universe in your mind's eye in such a way as to explain your plight. Let us talk for a moment about this notion of a higher self. In truth, there is no such thing as a higher self or a self from which you are wholly displaced. This is merely another illusion of division as produced by the finite and the first original lie of I am not. But you cannot experience that higher self as yourself in a land that is not infinite. Why? Because the higher self is you in infinite form. In that reality, there is no such thing as not infinite, remember? Thus, you experience a profound separation. There are also those who will argue, but Archangel Michael, the finite universe is huge. Therefore, it must be valid, right? Not necessarily. How big is your imagination after all? Is it really that difficult to mathematically produce unlimited fractals of creation? It is still math after all, and therefore it is clearly finite. It should be understood that the finite can easily surpass your mental capability to imagine it. Why is all of this so important? In the next chapter, we will examine exactly why this is so. Okay, that completes chapter 10. Chapter 11, which we will read in the next video, is prayer. And I did want to remind you, if you have not seen every one of these videos, in my first video where I read the introduction as well as the first chapter, in the introduction, the author states that this book, because it is written a bit differently, not to be taken in with the mind and to be taken in with the heart. Lots of words and phrases will be repeated. So if you have noticed that, it is on purpose. It is part of a way that I think from my understanding is a way for your heart sort of to take that information in by repeating things in a certain way, a certain number of times. And that does make sense to me, because from what I understand about the angels, they use numbers and symbols and sequences quite frequently. So that does make sense to me because I'm aware of that. But this chapter here has definitely had me sit back a little bit and kind of think about what Archangel Michael is saying. Even though the book is wholly meant to bring your focus back to using your heart in means of ruling and guiding your life rather than using your mind for everything. And that means letting go of lots of notions and lots of ideas. Some of these things that are being introduced in this chapter, as far as believing you're here to experience certain things, include, whether it's bad or good. So like I said already, that's giving me something to chew on. So I don't know. We'll see what chapter 11 holds. I'm very interested to get to that one. So hopefully this information is helping somebody out there. I know it is helping me. And till next time when we join up to read chapter 11, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Until next time, we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.